book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I will be going through my wrap up for the first half of August, as well as what I need to read for the second half of the month. Alright guys, so this is going to be a little bit of a speed round because, as you know, I like to talk in my videos apparently, but I gotta be out of here in about 30 minutes. So we are going to go through things relatively quickly. If you have any questions about any of the books that I talk about or want more information, let me know down in the comments and I am more than happy to answer you or talk more about any of these books. All right, so today is the 19th, so we are definitely over the 50% mark, but we are going to go through all the books that I read the 1st through yesterday, the 18th, and that totals 12 books. So when I said speed round, I mean speed round. So we are going to go ahead and jump into the first book right now. All right, so the first book I read was The Foxhole Court by Nora Savick, and I actually ended up reading the entire trilogy here in the first month. In fact, the last book is the one that I finished yesterday. So as I mentioned, the first book is The Foxhole Court. I gave this one a 4.5 stars. These are rereads for me. The second book is The Raven King, and I gave this one 5 stars. And the last one is The King's Men, and I also gave that one 5 stars. This series is a little difficult to talk about because I feel like there's so much going on, but pretty much we are following Neil. He's 18 years old and he has spent the last 8 years on the run with his mother from his psychopath, serial killer, mobster father. And at the beginning of this book, his mother had passed away and he is now on his own for the first time, trying to continue to stay under the radar so that his father does not find him and chop him into tiny little pieces. However, his plan to stay under the radar goes out the window when a recruiter for the Palomento State Foxes comes to recruit him for his XC team. XC is a made-up sport. It's not real. It's kind of lacrosse meets hockey set on a soccer field kind of situation. This is a relatively high contact sport. It's also a relatively new sport that was just invented about a generation or so ago, but it makes pretty big bucks, which means that if he joins this college team that is well known for its screw-ups, his father or one of his father's people is definitely going to recognize him, find him, and drag him back. So he tries to refuse this offer, but the team is like, yeah, no, you're coming home with me. And so Neil decides that he would rather spend his last year playing XC, making the most out of the situation, fully expecting to be dead by the end of the year. So this series pretty much just follows him as he improves his skills at the XC, as he reluctantly becomes friends with all these other players who are full of trauma and sketchy pasts, because the coach of this team only recruits like fixer-upper projects, I guess you can say. But Neil himself tries to end up trying to make the team better, helping them win the championship, helping fix all their personal problems so that he can leave the world a better place. So this book does have quite a few trigger warnings. Every time I talk about it, I bring that up. So please do check that out. It does have a very slow burn romance. Like for the first 2 books, you're like, is there something going on there? Because I feel like there might be. In the 3rd book, you're like, oh yeah, there was something going on there for sure. So I absolutely love this series. It breaks my heart. It gives me terrible anxiety. But that's what happens when you mix college sports, traumatized children, and the mob into one story. So read this series if you haven't. If you're looking for a new hyperfixation, this will be it, because it's mine right now and for the next 2 weeks. The next book that I finished was Evolved by N.R. Walker. And this is a sci-fi romance. It was relatively short, so I ended up reading the entirety of it on my flight back from Germany, actually. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. In this book, we are following Lloyd, and he has OCD, and he's been having trouble with relationships because of certain expectations that he holds for his living space and the way that he lives his life. And his ex-boyfriend ends up telling him, you know, clearly humans aren't good enough for you, so you should just date a robot. And recently there has been a big improvement in the quality of AI robots, and Sean decides, like, you know what, that's actually a good idea. And so he ends up purchasing a robot, a companion called Sean, who is kind of created specifically for Lloyd's personality. He has the same interests as him, and he's also there to be a sexual companion. At the end of the day, though, he is still a robot that is supposed to follow specific prompts and rules. And as Lloyd spends more time with Sean, and Sean kind of starts initiating different conversations or even starts to initiate sexual interactions, Lloyd starts to wonder if maybe there's something special about Sean, and that Sean is evolving beyond who he was initially created to be. I really thought that this was a really sweet book. It has a decent amount of smut, and we are dealing with a character that is a robot, so there are certain qualities about his body that are a little different than a usual person's body. I thought that Sean was a very sweet character. I really enjoy characters that are rather innocent and are kind of finding their way in the world. I feel like they give you a new outlook on life and give a new appreciation to smaller, simpler day-to-day activities. I thought that the smut was excellent, and that the book had just enough a plot to move it forward. Up next, I finished Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I did also read the novella that is in the back, which is called Lord Sorcier. Let me just... And I did count them as 2 separate books in my statistics, but I ended up giving Half a Soul 4 stars and Lord Sorcier 3.5 stars. In the main story, we are following Theodora, and she had half her soul stolen by a fae when she was young, and this causes her to not fully feel any emotions. Embarrassment, anger, fear, joy, all of those are very muted to her, which makes her a bit of an odd character. In the beginning of this book, the season is beginning, and she is trying to help her cousin find a husband, but they're not having any luck in the countryside, so her cousin suggests that they head to London. It seems that her cousin has an ulterior motive for wanting to go to London, and that is so that she can meet the Lord Sorcier to ask him for help with Dora's condition. And from there, we follow Theodora and the Lord Sorcier, Elias, as they try to figure out her curse, as well as the cause behind a new sleeping illness that is starting to affect a lot of children, specifically children in the workhouses within London. I did like that the story focused a lot on the treatment of people within the workhouses and the lack of effort that was being put into helping these people better their lives, and the fact that these people were definitely being exploited for their labor in exchange for very little in return. I thought that the romance was relatively slow and went at a pace that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the fact that they were more focused on the fact that children were falling asleep, and because they were falling asleep, they were eventually dying because they couldn't feed themselves and they couldn't drink, and obviously that is a priority to the romance, and I did like the fact that that was what was happening within this story. I also enjoyed the banter between the two of them, as well as all the side characters. We do see a little bit more of Elias's past and how he came to be friends with I don't remember his name, but he has a friend in this book, and that's what Lord Sorcier is about, and I thought that was a decent story as well. Next I finished Criminal Intentions by Cole McCade. Cole McCade is an author that I've read in the past and really enjoyed. I read his Undue Arrogance trilogy, and so I decided to go ahead and jump into this series as well. The series follows Malcolm and Seong Jae, and they are both on the police force. They are brought together on a case after a body of a queer man is found in the alley with his legs having been removed. Both of these officers are queer, so they end up taking a big interest in this case, and though both of them usually prefer to work alone, since they are both interested in this case and the fact that the captain is pushing them together, they decide to work together as best as they can. There is an age gap between two of these. Malcolm is, I don't remember how much older, but I would say around the 10-year mark older than Seong Jae, and Seong Jae just recently transferred to this precinct. However, he is still higher ranking than Malcolm, so that does cause some weirdness between the two of them. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. Now, I will say a big reason for that was because I looked at this series and it's like 13 books long. And I thought that this would be one of those companion series where we follow a different couple within public safety or something within law enforcement in each series. So when we were going through this book and the romance wasn't developing, I was like, where's my romance? And the reason is because this is going to be a relatively slow burn situation. In fact, Seong Jae is asexual. So it will continue on throughout the series. So I had false expectations going into this, and that obviously lowered my rating a little bit, which is a little unfair for the story. So I just wanted to throw that out there. The story was relatively gruesome. The murders were gory. So just know that going into the story, but I did think that the situation was relatively interesting. I will say, however, that I did pretty early on predict who was involved in the murder. So I thought it was a little bit on the obvious side, but that's just me. I did enjoy just watching their relationship develop, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the two grow closer together. And it seems like there might be a bigger crime that this serial killer was involved in that will kind of arch over all of the stories, so I'm interested to see where that goes. All right, this one I actually read before Criminal Intentions, but I just skipped over it, and that is Fence Volume 3 by C.S. Becat, Joanna the Mad, and Joanna Lafuente. And this is a queer contemporary sports comic. It follows a group of teenagers who are on or trying to get onto the high school fence team. The main character is Nicholas, yes, and he is a scholarship student there, specifically a sports scholarship, which means it's very important for him to get onto the team, because if he doesn't, he loses his scholarship and he's no longer able to attend this high school. At this point in the series, this finishes up the tryouts for the team. So the first 3 volumes of this have just been the tryouts to see who goes on to the team. And now I'm assuming we're going to be moving forward with the year, as well as with championships and all that jazz. I will say that I don't think it needed 3 volumes to get to this point. I think that there's only like maybe 5 volumes out or something like that. I don't remember how many volumes there are out, but I think there's also 2 full volumes that are associated with this. But I do think that the series is moving maybe a smidge too slow for my liking. I did, however, give this volume 4 stars. This was the first volume where I felt like I was really rooting for the character and where I was really invested in fencing. I personally don't really care about fencing, but in this one, I think the author did a really great job of creating hype for the competition. And here I was feeling intense kind of situation. I was like, oh my god, I hope he wins this one. So I think the author did a really good job with that. And once again, I do really enjoy the characters in the story. And obviously, the more we get to know them and the more they get to know each other, the more fun it is. So I will definitely be continuing this series. Next up, we finished Sweet Berries by C.M. Nacosta. And I ended up only giving this one 3 stars. So this is a monster romance. We are following Grace, and she lives in a town where it is primarily monsters that live there. The majority of the world is definitely populated by humans, and there are certain communities where they interact, but this is one of those rare communities where it's more monsters, fewer humans, and she is one of the few humans that work there, and she works at a farm, and is kind of there, I don't know if it's like public relations and kind of like advertising and creating events and whatnot situation. And she loves her job, she loves this town, but she is horny, and she just hasn't been able to really find someone to interact with that she doesn't work with, because she's at work all the time, but she doesn't want to have like a relationship with a coworker. But one night she gets home, and she realizes that she has someone watching her, a voyeur, and she performs masturbation for him. And then one day he shows up at her farm, and she realizes that it has been a Mothman that is watching her, and the 2 of them decide to strike up a relationship. The Mothman was adorable. I don't remember what his name is, so I'm just gonna call him Mothman. Nothing wrong with Mothman. Great guy. He's fuzzy. We love to see it. Grace was a lot of fun as well. A woman who's passionate about her job and passionate about her sex life. We love to see that as well. The problem is the writing style, and I was reading someone else's review and they called it like an Inception style writing. And that's exactly what it is. I cannot tell you how many times I didn't know where or when we were, because she gives like a warning at the beginning of the book. She's like, if you like a linear timeline, this isn't for you. And I was like, oh, I don't mind jumping back into the past, things like that. Yeah, but like, let me know, like break up the paragraph or something, or put a larger space so that I know that we're like in a different place or a different time. And it was so confusing, and it really takes you out of the story, because I'm like, has this already happened, or is this before this happened, and is this currently happening? I had no idea. Who knows? So yeah, I would say it was a sweet romance, but not easy to read at all. It was very confusing. So yeah, I only gave it 3 stars, and unfortunately this author's writing style is just not for me. All right, next up I finished what I think is my only audiobook of the month so far. I'm slumping when it comes to audiobooks. I'm just don't feel like listening to them right now, so I can definitely, I was gonna say I could see my numbers dropping, but I've read 12 books so far this month, so maybe not. But audiobook wise, yeah, maybe a little bit. And I read A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Little Badger. And this is, I believe, a middle grade. I think I put it as middle grade. And we are following Ollie and Nina. And Nina lives in the human world, and her family owns a bookstore, and her mother goes on expeditions to track weather or something. I don't remember what she does. But Nina has a very close relationship with her grandma, who lives on a land that their family has owned for many, many generations. However, this land is often pummeled by hurricanes, and her grandma's health is making it very difficult for her to travel. So Nina is very concerned that when the next hurricane comes, her grandma will not be able to leave and will end up dying in the storm. On the other hand, we are following Ollie, who lives in, I don't know if you would call it the spirit realm. He's a animal, human, person thing. And he can turn into a human, but he's also a copperhead snake, some sort of snake. Sorry, sometimes when I listen to audiobooks, I don't retain information as well. But he has set off on his own. He was the youngest child, and his mother was like, get out. So he has set out on his own and set up a nice little camp next to a pond where his little toad frog friend and him like to sunbathe on the rock, and his 2 friends, the coyotes, come and hang out with him, and life is pretty great. Until one day his little frog friend gets sick. And when a spirit animal gets sick, it's because the animals that they represent in the human world are facing extinction. So he and his friends decide to head to the human world to see if they can figure out what happened so suddenly to cause their friend to become ill, and if there's anything they can do to save him. Obviously, this causes our 2 characters to come together. I gave this book 4 stars. I have to admit, in the beginning, I was just kind of like listening to it, and I was like, oh, this is a good time, but it's not anything like special or overly memorable. But by the end, I have to say this was just such an adorable story, and especially Ollie, oh my gosh, there was like this scene where she was trying to like film like, oh, a scary encounter with a snake situation, and she was like, this doesn't work, you're too cute. And I was like, he is too cute. So I just really enjoyed these characters. I thought they were a lot of fun. I really loved how passionate they were about their friends and their family. And once again, I just really liked the myth portion of it as well, and I just thought that it was a really fun time to listen to. Highly suggest checking out this audiobook. All right, up next I finished volume 2 of Perfect World by Ray Aruga, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. I did like it more than the first one. There was a lot more drama going on in this one, and then, you know, that's what I want. I want some drama. Okay, I want something to really move the story forward. I felt like the first book was a little on the boring side, but it does seem like the story is picking up a little bit. In this book, we are following a woman who is reunited with her high school crush, but she realizes that he has suffered a spinal injury and is now using a wheelchair. This book focuses very much on starting a relationship and being in a relationship with someone who has a relatively severe disability that highly impacts their life and therefore will impact your life as well. the second volume in this book, they have now started their relationship officially, and they are facing some blockades with people that are trying to keep them apart for different reasons. We have some people that want them not to be together because they want to be with them, or we have other people that want her not to be with him because they are worried that she's giving up a certain lifestyle in order to be with him, because they see her as more of a caregiver position than as a girlfriend. So I'm really looking forward on how they're going to handle that situation, because I have a feeling it's probably a situation that a lot of people who are with people who have disabilities or chronic illnesses do face. But at the end of the day, when you are with a partner, whether they have a disability or not, you are caring for them and they are caring for you, and you are going to face obstacles. They may be different than the obstacles that able-bodied couples face, but that doesn't make them any worse and doesn't make them any less deserving of a happy and healthy relationship. So definitely looking forward to continuing this series. All right, and the last book that I'm going to talk about is Sanctuary with Kings by Catherine Moon, and this is the third and final book in the Tempting Monsters series. In this book, we are following a woman, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking up everyone's name because there's like a lot of them. Because it's a reverse harem, but she is the daughter of a goddess, and she has spent the last 200 years enslaved in a house where she was used as a lure to bring certain monsters into the home for sexual interactions. In the first two books, we are following people that are either in a specific house that caters to monsters, but they very much want to be there, or they are working at a theater that caters once again to monsters and their sexual needs, but once again they want to be here. This time we are dealing with someone who was trapped and spent 200 years being essentially raped by multiple monsters. She is someone who feeds off of pleasure, so this barely kept her alive, and so she pretty much spent 200 years being starved. So obviously our character has quite a bit of trauma to work through. During this book, she is brought to a castle for safekeeping because this villain is trying to hunt her down so that they can bind her to their house again, and obviously she does not want that. While she is there, she develops a relationship with 4 very caring people. We have a dragon, we have a griffin, we have a werewolf, and we have a minotaur. So I don't know if I mentioned if this was a monster romance, but it is reverse harem monster romance. And they start to do what they can to feed her while also simultaneously making her feel safe during sexual encounters. We also do face the final battle in this book, and I would say that was my favorite part of this book. Unfortunately, I only gave this one a 3.5 stars. I feel like during book 2, a lot of people were like, this is too slow and it's too long. And I felt that a little bit, but not too much, but I definitely felt it in this book. The beginning was way too slow, and there's a part of me that feels really bad because one of the reasons that it was slow is because we're dealing with someone who has a lot of trauma that they're trying to overcome. So obviously her partners are a little bit slower to approach her than the other girls in the other book, but I would say that things didn't really start getting interesting until maybe the 65% mark, and this book is just a little under 500 pages, so that's quite a lot of pages to get through. And then the final battle takes up maybe the last 15-20%, and I did really enjoy that aspect of it. There were parts of this book that I liked, but I just didn't connect to the characters as much for some reason. There wasn't any of the male characters that really stood out to me that I really gravitated towards and loved. And honestly, the smut didn't do too much for me either because I wasn't as connected to the characters. So I would say definitely the weakest book in the series. If you're into reverse harem, monster romance situations, I would definitely still give them a try, but heads up, they are kind of long. And the last one is just meh, in my opinion. All right, so before we move on to what I'm currently reading, I just wanted to let you know how I was doing on my Orilium prompts. I'm gonna go ahead and just take a screenshot of what things look like right now. If you don't know about Orilium, I will go ahead and link Book Roast down below. She is the one that created this and runs it, so you can go ahead and check it out. We are in the spring equinox, autumn equinox, some sort of equinox, I think the autumn one, and we are taking classes to be able to achieve certain careers. I selected 2 careers, both Necromancer and Beastmaster. I don't care too much about accomplishing all of the prompts within 1 month. I just like having prompts, so that's why I make it a little bit more difficult for me, but I'm just gonna go through real quick which books I've read for that, and then we'll go into a bit more of what I still need to accomplish. So to start off with animal studies, I have accomplished all 3 of the prompts that I need to read for that class. The first was Pet Pick. I read the Foxhole Court for that because for my TBR game, Loki ended up picking that game for me, so that worked out perfectly. Then for a debut book, I ended up reading Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. And for distinguished, the prompt was read this book in 2 days, and I chose Criminal Intentions episode 1 for that. Then we have Spells and Incantations. I only read the first of the 2 prompts, which is read a manga, comic, or graphic novel. I used Fence Volume 3 for that. Then for Conjuration, I have completed all 3 prompts. For Ordinary, read a court royal book. I chose The Raven King. This doesn't technically have royalty in it, but the highest profession or the highest level that you can reach in XC, like the guys that go to like the Olympics and stuff, they are called the court. So that's why I went ahead and put that in there. It might have been a bit of a stretch, but it is what it is. I'm taking it. Then for Qualified, Inspired, Set in a Different Culture Than Yours, I used Perfect World, Volume 2. Then we have Distinguished Indie or Self-Published Book, and for this I read A Sanctuary with Kings. Then for Restoration, I've only read 1 of the 2 that I need to read, and that's Start a Book Before Bed, and I read Sweet Berries for that. And then haven't done Demonology yet. In fact, I think I'm going to save that one for last since it's pretty random and I'll have no idea what it's going to say. And then I completed Elemental Studies because I only needed to fulfill 1 prompt for this, and this was to read a book with the word earth in it. I know it seems like a lot of people struggle with this prompt, but I ended up reading A Snake Falls to Earth for that. All right, so let's go through the ones that I still need to do, which is Qualified for Spells and Incantation, black cover or fire on the cover. For this one, I'm really hoping to get to Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a book that is still on my July-August TBR. Next, we have the Qualified prompt for Restoration, read a book in a different spot every time. I put volume, 3 and 4 on hold for Perfect World, and it's ready for me to pick up. So once I pick that up, it's a manga, so it should be relatively easy for me to kind of jump around the house while reading it. So that is the one I will use for that. And then finally, Demonology, first book you see on Instagram or Goodreads. Once I fulfill those other 2 prompts, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to check Goodreads, find the first book that I either own or can easily get from my library, then go on Instagram, do the same thing, and whichever book I want to read more is the one that I will select. So for now, I don't know what that is. As far as my current read, I'm currently reading A Curious Beginning by Diana Raybourn. I've put this book down and picked it up a few times because I was in my all for the game obsession. And I also needed to prioritize the Sanctuary with Kings because that's on KU, and my KU was ending on the 16th. So I'm currently only 80 pages into it, but this is the book that I'm going to be focusing on moving forward. My current audiobook is All the Feels by Olivia Dade. I think I'm only like 9% through this. Like I said, I'm just not doing that great with audiobooks. I don't have a lot of time to listen to them during work, and I don't really do so outside of work. But hopefully I complete this by the end of the month. And then finally, I technically still have The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling on my TBR. Not 100% sure if I will get to this. It depends on how quick I read these next few days. It is possible that I just fail my TBR this time. All right, guys, those are all the books that I've read and still need to read. Let me know down below how you are doing so far this month. Thank you so much, as always, for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!